Well, hello and welcome to the Eagle and Child podcast. We are so glad that you've joined us today, and I am super excited to introduce to you one of my wonderful friends who is our next guest on the podcast, Alana Kuwabara. She went to an acting conservatory in New York City, so has a background in acting and film producing. She also has been in ministry for 2 decades. She lives in St. Augustine, Florida. She focuses on women's ministry. She's also a business consultant. What doesn't this woman do? She is awesome. Today, we are going to be looking at Dorothy L. Sayers, who is so fitting for Alana. So Alana, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here because you're awesome. I love talking to you. And Dorothy is like our girl. So
Absolutely.
I'm very excited to talk about her.
She is goals. Definitely, she perfectly matches you, I think. In all the different, the creativity, the apologetics, the feistiness, like
the writing plays.
Yeah. Brilliant.
She's awesome.
Yeah. So we're looking at Dorothy L. Sayers. I love her because she had, a bit of a relationship, a friendship with C.S. Lewis, and she studied at Oxford, is just a brilliant intellect, but then also a great creative writer, just an incredible woman. So I'm really excited to dive into her today. She's obviously in that sort of modern period as well, so C.S. Lewis sort of time, so 1950s onwards. But I would love to hear from you, Alana, just a little bit on her background. Where did she come from, her spiritual formation, and that sort of stuff?
Okay, so I'm going to give you the sort of like official bio about
her. Okay.
Because, so I don't know if you've heard of the Marion E. Wade Center.
Yes, at Wheaton.
Yes.
I was supposed to go there this year, and because of COVID, I couldn't go there. Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Well, I figured you would have heard of it. And she is the only lady that is the subject of their studies there. But for anybody who doesn't know, this is their description from their website. So the Marion E. Wade Center promotes cultural engagement and spiritual formation by offering a collection of resources available nowhere else in the world, emphasizing the ongoing relevance of 7 British Christian authors who provide a distinctive blend of intellect, imagination, and faith. C.S. Lewis, J.R.R. Tolkien, Dorothy Sayers, George MacDonald, G.K. Chesterton, Owen Barfield, and Charles Williams.
The greats.
The greats.
I love it. So if you live in Chicago or anywhere near Chicago, you should definitely check it out, right?
Check it out, yeah. And interestingly enough, the co-directors, the Downings, Crystal Downing was my English professor when I was in college before I went to acting school.
No!
It's crazy.
She spoke at the Chesterton conference this year.
She did. And
a boss lady.
She's incredible. She really is very passionate about what she does, and she's really able to pass that on to other people. And there's things that I remember from her classes still.
Wow.
From a long time ago. But I still remember
centuries ago. Yeah.
Centuries ago in my youth. So Dorothy L. Sayers. Okay, so she was born June 13th, 1893, and she died December 17th, 1957. And I thought it would be good to kind of put that in context for us with some other people that are a little bit more well-known. So Lewis was 1898 to 1963. So she died in 1957. He died in 1963. Chesterton died in 1936. But so she was born to an Anglican rector. And so she kind of grew up in the church the way a lot of people grew up in the church, just like kind of a normal part of your life without there being any sort of spiritual kind of weight to it. It's just like we go to church on Sundays, so she actually got into detective writing, and that's what she was really known for a long time. She was quite famous,
and not just Lewis. Among Christians, like not just the Christian bookstores. She was like a legit famous writer.
It wasn't like, if you like Agatha Christie, you should read
Yes.
Dorothy Sayers, a
Yes.
Christian detective
Yeah,
writer.
I'm not gonna
No.
mention any titles or anything like that because that's offensive. But you can put two and two together.
Yeah, totally. A detective writer. That's the thing that got her famous. And there's so many wonderful, interesting facts about this. So there was something called the Detective Club.
Cool.
You've probably heard of this. Where is it? The Detection Club. So
Never.
G.K. Chester, never heard of it.
Never heard of the Detection Club. Tell me about it.
So G.K. Chesterton was the first president
Ooh.
of this club.
Okay.
Which then Dorothy Sayers and Chesterton were in this club together with a number of other writers. Wow. And then Sayers was the third president. The second president, nobody really knows who that, they know who it was, but they're not a recognizable name, unfortunately. But then, so Sayers was president of the Detection Club until her death, at which time Agatha Christie became the president. So this is cool. Like a pretty big deal. And this club still exists today.
Wow. Are you the president today?
I'll never tell.
Yeah, exactly.
No. So anyway, so I thought that was really cool.
That is cool.
Chesterton was she would cite him as the biggest influence in her spirituality.
Wow.
And apparently they were, pretty good friends for a time. And then so she was also an accomplished and popular playwright. And there's another random thing. So yeah, we are alike in some ways. So she did a translation of Dante's The Divine Comedy. Yeah. That is considered unmatched in quality and readability. So
wow.
It's like they asked her to do it and she did it. Yeah, she's brilliant. And so yeah, she did go to Oxford. She graduated in 1915. But she was not allowed to have a degree.
Yeah, because women don't need degrees. That was
you can go to the school. Yeah, they don't need them. Then why do you let them in the school? But you let them in the school, and you let her graduate.
Excelled like beyond a lot of the other. Yeah, go for it, fiery Alana. Go for it.
Listen, I just I want it to make sense, like. There's some things where I could go, all right, I guess that kind of makes sense. But you let her do the whole thing. And she, like you said, she excelled. But you don't get the actual degree. And okay, I don't want to skip around too much. But while she was there, she also was part of the Mutual Admiration Society, which is a literary society of undergraduate women. Which is also pretty cool. And yeah, so she says like she never had a conversion experience. She just kind of grew up in church, and then it sounds like Chesterton got to her and she started to really kind of care more about orthodoxy at that point in time.
Amazing.
And so then she was commissioned to do, and so another big thing that she's known for is she was commissioned to do this series of radio plays about the life and death of Jesus.
Wow.
And it was called The Man Born to Be King.
Amazing. Very cool.
So it was quite controversial. Because she took a year to write this, to research and write it. She read, I'm going to mess up his name, but she read Josephus. Wow. Yeah. Did I say it right?
Yeah.
And so she spent a year like just poring over all the scholarly literature that was available at the time to make sure
the original languages, because she's a scholar who's studied all the languages, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So in order to, make sure that everything was as accurate as possible, what she did was the disciples and Jesus spoke slang,
Wow.
not King James.
Oh.
And not only that, but some of the slang was American slang.
Oh no.
Which was, so listen, thousands of people wrote in to Winston Churchill and the Archbishop of Canterbury.
Of course
and they were like, you cannot allow this to happen. This cannot go on the air. This
disgusting.
Cannot continue.
Despicable.
Yeah. Despicable, scandalous. And so there were all these protests, but the plays went on from 1941, just before Christmas. And then in 1942, someone accused her of having caused the fall of Singapore to the Japanese because of these plays, because it was God's judgment against these plays.
I've heard that. How ridiculous. Poor girl.
But on the good end of it, she got thousands of letters of people saying that these plays renewed their faith, renewed their passion for Christ, and just changed their life, all because of the scandal. People tuned in, it was like, no such thing as bad press kind of a thing.
That's right. And I think, did C.S. Lewis, it had some profound impact on him? He loved it or something like that.
He loved Man Born to Be King.
Yeah.
Hold on, let me find my note about that. I swear I had a note about it. I know. Oh, I do. So, so right before C.S. Lewis's death, he was asked to name the most important influences in his spiritual life. He named 4 people. One of them was Chesterton.
Yeah.
2 of them were some like spiritual
George MacDonald, something like that. Yeah.
Somebody, they were like, I don't know who they were. And then, but the 4th was Dorothy Sayers.
Wow.
So like months before he died, this is what he says.
Amazing.
Dorothy Sayers. And he listed the Man Born to Be King as one of the texts he turned to for spiritual edification and inspiration.
Wow. That's powerful.
That's pretty powerful, right?
Yeah.
And pretty cool. So they also, Sayers was a big fan of Lewis's screw tape letters.
Yeah.
And so she wrote, so this is so funny. So this one guy who was particularly upset about Man Born to Be King, his name was L.T. Duff. Okay. And so he writes her this letter that's kind of rude. And it's basically like, you strike me as an intelligent person. You clearly put a lot of research and effort into this, and yet you included all of these miracles. How could you possibly believe in miracles?
Of course.
And so she wrote him kind of a nasty letter back, which I of course loved. And you can only talk about Dorothy Sayers so much. Like, you have to hear her actual words.
Absolutely.
Because she's
even
incredible.
Just reading her letters between her and Lewis, like that for me was just like, this is awesome.
Yeah. So one of those letters, she wrote it because she'd been going back and forth with this guy, and she ended up writing like her own version of a screw tape letter. She created her own character. His name was Slug Drip. And apparently this is like a thing that people do, but she was one of the first. And so she sent that to Lewis, and it was basically about her. It was basically about like this, apprentice devil working with the guy, the atheist, who'd been writing her these letters and bothering her, and what their evil plot was. And so then at the end of it, she, this is her note. Okay. I'm reading her words now. So she said, "Meanwhile, I'm left with the atheist on my hands. I do not want him. I have no use for him. I have no missionary zeal at all. The man keeps on bothering about miracles. He cannot spell and has a mind like a junk shop." She says, "This will go on for years. I cannot bear it. Two of the books I recommended him are yours. I only hope they will arouse him to fury. Then I will hand him on to you. You like souls. I don't.
Amazing. And that
she said, oh, wait, two more lines. She said, God is simply taking advantage of the fact that I can't stand intellectual chaos and it isn't fair. Anyhow, there aren't any up-to-date books about miracles, so please tell me what to do about this relic of the Darwinian age who is wasting my time, sapping my energies, and destroying my soul. Yours indignantly, Dorothy Sayers. And then he wrote back to her, I'm starting a book on miracles.
This is Lewis. Yeah, C.S. Lewis. Yeah. Exactly. That's what I was going to say. That inspired him to write the book, right?
It did.
Amazing.
It did. Absolutely did.
They are so fun. Dorothy and Jack. There's a book that you've read this book, haven't you? I haven't read it, but I know
I haven't read the whole thing,
letters.
But yes.
Dorothy and Jack. So C.S. Lewis and Dorothy Sayers going at it basically via letters. So just debating each other, but spurring each other on. They both had a lot of respect for each other.
Yeah. And it's interesting. They're very similar when you read them. I was just blown away at how, and maybe it's just like the time period, and they're they're in Britain. It's like, okay, I'm sure a lot of it has to do with that, but the intro to Mere Christianity, right? C.S. Lewis is setting up this framework of the natural law, right? And how, we can recognize this thing, but where does it come from? It has to be outside of, it has to be outside of us, or else it doesn't work. This is me butchering C.S. Lewis.
No, that's great.
But so then Dorothy Sayers in The Mind of the Maker, she sets the whole thing up with this idea of law and rules and that the natural law and arbitrary law. So the very first chapter of The Mind of the Maker, Dorothy Sayers' book, is The Laws of Nature and Opinion. She's definitely, like, C.S. Lewis would kind of go after people a little bit, but she goes straight to the point. So in her preface, she says, this book is not an apology for Christianity, nor is it an expression of personal religious belief. It is a commentary in the light of specialized knowledge on a particular set of statements made in the Christian creeds and their claim to be statement of fact. It is necessary to issue this caution, for the popular mind has grown so confused that it is now no longer able to receive any statement of fact except as an expression of personal feeling.
Wow.
Some time ago, the present writer, pardonably irritated by a very prevalent ignorance concerning the essentials of Christian doctrine, published a brief article in which those essentials were plainly set down in words that a child could understand.
Savage.
That's the preface of her book. That's 2 paragraphs in.
She's awesome.
She's like, a child could understand this. Every clause was preceded by some such phrase as the church maintains, the church teaches, if the church is right, and so forth. The only personal opinion expressed was that, though the doctrine might be false, it could not very well be called dull. Every newspaper that reviewed this article accepted it without question as a profession of faith. Some, heaven knows why, called it a courageous profession of faith, as though professing Christians in this country were liable to instant persecution. One review, syndicated throughout the empire, called it a personal confession of faith by a woman who feels sure she is right. Now, what the writer believes or does not believe is of little importance one way or the other. What is of great and disastrous importance is the proved inability of supposedly educated persons to read.
Brilliant. She's amazing.
She goes, it is common knowledge among school teachers that a high percentage of examination failures result from not reading the question. The candidate presumably applies his eyes to the paper, but his answer shows that he is incapable of discovering by that process what the question is.
Oh, she's brilliant. I love her. Maybe it's a good opportunity now to move through to maybe some works, because we've sort of had a look at one of her plays. We've had a look at like some of her writing, but can you give us a bit of an idea on what are the big works that she's known for, and maybe like a little bit of depth into those?
Yeah. So what I was just reading from is The Mind of the Maker, which I want to give you like a good, this is in the intro part, The Mind of the Maker. It's basically about the creativity of God and the Trinity.
Beautiful.
So, but that would be like at the top of the list.
Awesome.
And then obviously she's got the play, The Man Born to be King. She has all of her detective novels, the Lord Peter Wimsey series, which didn't really, they didn't really stand the test of time the way Agatha Christie's did.
Wow.
And I hate to always be like putting Dorothy Sayers in comparison with other people, because she stands on her own 2 feet. But it's so weird to me that I never heard of her until you're like, hey, I'm doing this podcast and here's some people that you could choose from. And I was like, oh, this one.
Do Dorothy. Because I really wanted you to do Dorothy Sayers. I'm really, really pumped that you did.
I'm so glad that you did, because she just really opened my eyes to a lot of things. But I love Agatha Christie. I love C.S. Lewis. She's right there. It's like she's there, but I never heard of her. So then she did a couple of talks, two of which were put into a book.
Ooh.
Which I have. And
Are Women Human?
Wonderful title, Are Women Human? The answer, well, you'll have to read the book to find out. No, the answer is obviously yes. Astute and witty essays on the role of women in society.
And it's interesting because she was criticized for being very conservative and sort of orthodox in her views around women, but then obviously also very much pushing the boundaries and like, you know, an amazing accomplished woman in herself. So I think this is going to be super interesting just to hear, how does she sort of present that, like a woman's role and who she is and what she's called to do and all that.
Well, she actually, that was one thing that she didn't like about Lewis. She felt like the way that he depicted marriage and I have a great quote. Sayers comments on Lewis's views of women in another letter where she stated, I do admit that he is apt to write shocking nonsense about women in marriage. That, however, is not because he is a bad theologian, but because he is a rather frightened bachelor.
Yes. Boom. Very savage. Very savage.
Savage. Takes no prisoners. So it is interesting that the controversy there on her views about women, but I think she really just nails it in these essays. There's 2 in here, and the first one, she was asked to come and speak at the Women's Society in 1938. Okay. And she's basically like, I don't really know if you want me to do this. Because she's like, I don't really identify myself as a feminist.
No.
I have 2 quotes from these essays that really kind of say it all. But she says, I do not know that it is very easy to explain without offense or risk of misunderstanding exactly what I do mean, but I will try. So they actually brought her there to do this because they wanted her to make herself clear. So she says in the second essay, which is The Human Not Quite Human, the first thing that strikes the careless observer is that women are unlike men. They're the opposite sex. Though why opposite, I do not know. What is the neighboring sex? Which, you know, welcome to 2021 should learn some things.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But the fundamental thing that women are more like men than anything else in their world. And so she talks about how men are typically seen as being male and human, while women are seen as being women or being feminine. So then back to are women human? The question of sex equality is, like all questions affecting human relationships, delicate and complicated. It cannot be settled by loud slogans or hard and fast assertions like a woman is as good as a man, or women's place is in the home, or women ought not to take men's jobs. The minute one makes such assertions, one finds one has to qualify them. A woman is as good as a man is meaningless to say. There might be, I'm sorry, I'm skipping around. When we balance, say, the poet against the engineer, we are faced with a fundamental difference of temperament. So that here our question is complicated by the enormous social problem whether poetry or engineering is, quote, better for the state or for humanity in general. There may be people who would like a world that was all engineers or all poets, but most of us would like to have a certain number of each. So there again, we should differ about the desirable proportion of engineering to poetry. The only proviso we should make is that people with dreaming and poetical temperaments should not entangle themselves in engines, and that mechanically minded persons should not issue booklets of bad verse. So, basically, I'm going to skip ahead because this part really, when I read this, I was like, this woman gets me. She gets 2020.
Wow.
Which we're in 2020 part 2.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned.
Part 2.
But there's just like some fundamental things that she just gets. That is so obvious that it hardly seems worth saying when she's talking about, obviously you can't just say a woman is as good as a man is as meaningless as saying a poet is as good as an engineer. Like, what does that even mean?
What does it mean? Yeah, absolutely.
But it is the mark of all movements, however well-intentioned, that their pioneers tend, by much lashing of themselves into excitement, to lose sight of the obvious. In reaction against the age-old slogan, woman is the weaker vessel, or the still more offensive, woman is a divine creature, we have, I think, allowed ourselves to drift into asserting that a woman is as good as a man without always pausing to think exactly what we mean by that. What I feel we ought to mean is something so obvious that it is apt to escape attention altogether. Vis-a-vis, not that every woman is, in virtue of her sex, as strong, clever, artistic, level-headed, industrious, and so forth as any man that can be mentioned, but that a woman is just as much an ordinary human being as a man, with the same individual preferences and with just as much right to the tastes and preferences of an individual. What is repugnant to every human being is to be reckoned always as a member of a class and not as an individual person.
Wow, great. Brilliant. Mic drop.
Mic drop.
Dorothy Sayers.
There's a mic drop on every page. Like, if you could see this, it's like I have underlined and dog-eared every page.
Amazing.
So I highly recommend this if you... I feel like I was reading a lot about Sayers, and then I was reading one of her Lord Whimsy novels, which it's fun, but it's really hard to keep up with because it's so contemporary to those times that they're using like words we don't use anymore, and like there's the what do you call it? The mannerisms and the manners and the classes and just the way things were in Britain. Like, you need to like take a class just to understand what's going on. It doesn't flow for me. For maybe somebody else does. But it wasn't until I read this, which is basically, it's like a pamphlet. It's a very short.
Yeah.
That I was like, oh, now I know who this is. I know who this woman is. So if you just want to dive right in and really know like who is Dorothy Sayers and why should I read anything else, I would start with Are Women Human? Beautiful. Awesome. Yeah, for sure.
So cool. Are there any other big works or events or any any of her creative projects that you want to mention, or should we move on to her influence and her, like, why we should know her today?
Well, she did Letters to a Diminished Church, which I've been meaning to read, but I just, between the title and having read some of her other works at this point, I just know it's going to be super relevant.
Wow.
I just know it's going to feel like she's talking to us in 2020 part 2. So, and she has an essay in there called Why Work? And this was she was very passionate about this. And I'll just read you this one short paragraph, which is the opening to it. She said, I have already on a previous occasion spoken at some length on the subject of work and vocation. What I urged then was a thoroughgoing revolution in our whole attitude to work. I ask that it should be looked upon not as a necessary drudgery to be undergone for the purpose of making money, but as a way of life in which the nature of man should find its proper exercise and delight, and so fulfill itself to the glory of God. That it should, in fact, be thought of as a creative activity undertaken for the love of the work itself, and that man, made in God's image, should make things as God makes them for the sake of doing well a thing that is well worth doing.
Wow, that's so beautifully written.
Yeah. And and powerful. And this was, one of the this was a subject that she was passionate about, that there were, it's gotten far worse. So, but, that there were, these people just, this drudgery, kind of necessary drudgery just to make money. And that she didn't see that, imago Dei in that. And that, as images of God, we should be doing something higher.
Yeah, and it's in that, I love that idea that it's in that creative process, as we're being creative and we're like sort of reflecting that image of God. We are actually fulfilling our highest calling to be made in the image of God, and then to give glory back to God through our work, through our creativity, our work and all that sort of thing. So I love what you said there. Like, it's almost in the attitude as well. If we're like hating what we're doing and whatever, it's almost like a corruption of that image, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a resentment for it,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I think, in terms of why get into Dorothy Sayers, I mean, her influence, I think, interestingly enough, is probably felt more through Lewis.
Wow.
And in an intangible way, because so many of us didn't even know who she was. And so kind of as you start to learn more about her, you discover these trailways of like, oh, like here's another interesting tidbit. She had done a series of talks about the creeds and orthodoxy on BBC Radio. And they were so successful that BBC was like, hey, we need to keep this up. And so a few years later, they asked C.S. Lewis to do it. And those talks became Mere Christianity.
Amazing. Isn't that incredible?
So it's like, there's all of these little winding roads that kind of, a lot of them lead back to Sayers. And, I think she's kind of just part of that, almost like an ecosystem at the time of, these Eagle and Childs and, guys. And so I would say that her influence, as far as I'm aware, and I'm like this deep into everything that she's done and learning about her. But just for the mere fact that C.S. Lewis would list her, and he only listed 4 people as being the most influential in his life. He listed her next to Chesterton. Like, just go get a book.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Get into this lady. Absolutely. She's awesome.
And plus, so there's that learning about the influence that is not quite so obvious. I think is a good thing to do. But also she's, I would read her the same way that I read Lewis. She puts language to, the reason why I love Lewis is because he puts language to things that I already knew or I already had a sense of, but didn't know how to express. Not everything, obviously.
Yeah. That's great.
But Mere Christianity, especially. But Sayers is kind of the same way, but in a like we keep saying feisty.
In a sassy female way.
In a sassy female way. And you know, she talks about that as well in Are We Humans? Like there's some things that will like what you don't need a woman. I can't remember exactly what it is. It's like you don't need a woman's opinion on how to build a highway. Like you just build a highway that works. There's no like feminine or masculine way to build a highway. But there are some things that are masculine and feminine. And it's like, you know, Lewis really relies heavily on you know, war analogies. And so, you know, if that's going to go over your head, there's probably something that Sayers wrote that tackles similar subjects, but from a different perspective. And they just kind of read in a very similar way, like I said before. So, and she also speaks to creativity. And awesome. Obviously for me, that is great. I think that's another wonderful reason to read her, because there's just something about her that's very what's the word I want to use? Normal, just like an average citizen. I think because she just kind of grew up in the church, didn't really have her sights set on theology, was a detective writer, and then made this switch. And she never published another detective novel again when this light went off. She just focused on, you know, theology. And so she's coming at it from that perspective. It's not super academic in that sense. It's very practical. Her writing is very practical and pointed to specific issues. But it's still, you're still getting those contemporary ideas from Chesterton Lewis time period.
That's so awesome. Do you have any favorite quotes that you've come across as you've been reading Sayers' works?
All the ones I read.
Yeah. Awesome.
Oh my gosh, I just opened up to a really good one.
Yeah.
So she's talking about this issue of, you know, women being asked, why do you want to wear trousers? Like, this is an important issue.
Yeah. This Oxford scholar. Why
do women need to wear trousers? Like, why can't you just wear your dresses?
Yeah.
So she says, let me give one simple illustration of the difference between the right and wrong kind of feminism. Let us take this terrible business, so distressing to the minds of bishops, of the women who go about in trousers. We are asked, why do you want to go about in trousers? They are extremely unbecoming to most of you. You only do it to copy the men. To this we may very properly reply, it is true that they are unbecoming. Even on men, they are remarkably unattractive. But as you men have discovered for yourselves, they are comfortable. They do not get in the way of one's activities like skirts, and they protect the wearer from drafts about the ankles. As a human being, I like comfort and dislike drafts. If the trousers, here's the quote, if the trousers do not attract you, so much the worse. For the moment, I do not want to attract you. I want to enjoy myself as a human being.
Oh, lol. That's awesome. Brilliant. I love her humor and her wit, but then mixed with her intelligence. It's brilliant. It's not like she's saying nothing. She's saying something quite profound, but with that added wit and sass. I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Any other quotes that you want to mention, or?
Oh, okay. Let me check my other notes. Honestly, I don't think so, because we'll be here all night, because then I'll just start. I'm like, no, go back.
Yeah.
Are we going to cut out these pauses?
We can. Yeah. That's fine.
I do. I actually could grab an, this one's a little bit more serious, if you will. So this is from Mind of the Maker, and she's just set up basically how you can have a law, an arbitrary law, and then you have like a law of nature. So if you're playing, a game of cricket, you can have a law that says whatever. If the ball goes out of these bounds, then this is the penalty for that. That's just something that's arbitrary. You came up with that. But you can't have a law that defies the law of gravity. You can't say, well, in order to get a point, the ball has to go into outer space and circle the earth 3 times. Like, that's crazy. But she's saying that we're having a problem kind of differentiating between these 2 types of laws. And so she said something that I just thought was really pertinent to today. So the second condition is, of course, that the arbitrary law shall not run counter to the law of nature. If it does, it cannot be enforced. Thus, if the MCC, the governing body for cricket, were to agree in a thoughtless moment that the ball must be so hit by the batsman that it should never come down to earth again, cricket would become an impossibility. A vivid sense of reality usually restrains sports committees from promulgating laws of this kind. Other legislators occasionally lack this salutary realism. Here's the quote. When the laws regulating human society are so formed as to come into collision with the nature of things, and in particular with the fundamental realities of human nature, they will end by producing an impossible situation, which, unless the laws are altered, will issue in such catastrophes as war, pestilence, and famine. Catastrophes thus caused are the execution of the universal law upon arbitrary enactments which contravene the facts. They are thus properly called by theologians judgments of God.
Wow.
So, this idea of arbitrary laws coming into, with natural laws, and I feel like
2020.
we're dealing with some of
2021.
that.
Yeah, absolutely. No elaboration necessary.
No elaboration necessary. But very, very pointed, and good to consider, where we're headed and what does that look like, and if what she's saying is true, and I think it is, that like we need to be on the lookout and active and try to make sure that arbitrary laws and the laws of nature, laws of God's nature, aren't colliding in that kind of way. And what can we do?
Yeah, that's so good. Do you have any fun facts or any fun stories? This is always my favorite part. Just any insights that you could give us. Yeah. Sorry, we're setting this up to be like a massive thing. But do you have any fun facts, fun stories about Dorothy L. Sayers that you could tell us?
Get used to disappointment. Honestly, my favorite fun story is that, what is the guy's name? The atheist that kept writing her. LT Duff. There it is. LT Duff. And she was just so exacerbated by this guy. And the fact that she said, when she wrote to C.S. Lewis about him, I will hand him on to you. You like souls. I don't. She said, I have no missionary zeal at all. Like, I don't want to be dealing with this guy.
I don't
Get him out of my life.
Get me into the green room. I don't want to associate with the people. That's what she's basically saying. Oh.
So, yeah. No. The answer is no. I don't. I feel like her whole life is a
a fun, fun story, fun fact. The way that she lives, the way that she interacts with other people. She just seems to be a very interesting, funny, fun person.
Yeah, there's definitely, I think if you were to go back into her earlier years, you could find some interesting, fun stuff. That book, Dorothy and Jack.
Yeah.
The first, few chapters of it is basically like a retelling of both of their lives in parallel. So like from birth, like what was going on with her, what was going on with him. And obviously they weren't the same age, but like what was her growing up life like, and comparing and contrasting that. And I seem to recall there were some interesting stories in there. But like I said, I would rather read her than read about her.
Yeah, wow. Yeah. Yeah, like actually go and read the letters between her and C.S. Lewis, because they're just like brilliant. And I just love the debate and the drama of it all. I think it's like it's fun. So fun. It's just fun. Yeah. And I love
There's also another. Go ahead.
Oh no, sorry. I was just going to say I love that that relationship where they're just spurring one another on. They're really like, pushing each other to think more deeply, to think more critically, to think, intellectually, to sort of push past that frontier and really come up with good ideas, but in the friendship as well. So I really find that inspiring for like us and people we have on the podcast and other people who are watching and listening, just to have those community of friends where you are sort of spurring one another on into those deeper thoughts and thinking about, these important questions and, thrashing them out with each other,
Yeah, that's so important. It's so important for us personally to keep our brains active and just to not like get into your own little bubble, but also to work out how you can disagree with other people. There's actually a really good talk, even though I just said I'd rather read her than listen to other people talk about her. But if you're going to, there's a really good talk with Crystal Downing, Dr. Crystal Downing and her husband. I think they are at the Marion E. Wade Center.
Oh, awesome.
And they're talking about, I'm just going to pull up the name of it real quick because.
Yeah, go for it. Is it about C.S. Lewis and Sayers, like Dorothy and Jack and their...
It's about, it's called C.S. Lewis and Dorothy L. Sayers, A Feisty Friendship.
Oh, how fun is that? Yeah.
It's fun, and it's about an hour long, but one of the things that they're kind of trying to pull out of that was this ability to have a conversation with people that you disagree with, and also how to talk to people you don't know, strangers who disagree with you. So there's because there's so many letters that Sayers wrote and that she wrote to fans and detractors. She has given us like a really great blueprint. So there's that one. There's also The Subversive Sayers, Christ, Culture, and the Shocking Dorothy Sayers, which is a new book that is out. And then, I think I was mixing two things together. So there's this other woman, Amy Orr Ewing.
Oh, yes, she's awesome.
She has a talk, The Apologetic Method of Dorothy L. Sayers, which that's the one that's more about, talking to people about Jesus and
awesome.
in our day and age, and what we can learn from Dorothy about that.
She's awesome. She's on Instagram. I think she is currently the president of the Oxford Centre for Apologetics or something like that, or evangelism.
Okay.
Yeah, she's amazing. Wonderful lady. Awesome. Well, is there anything else that you want to tell us about Sayers? Anything you want to leave us with before we go?
Yes. My big plug for Sayers is just go and read her work. Start with Are Women Human, then Mind of the Maker, and then Letters to a Diminished Church. I think that you'll be encouraged. Awesome. You will laugh. You will be inspired. You will get some passion back if you need it about how to engage with culture and be a Christian.
Brilliant.
In a way that is attractive, but oppositional, because we're not supposed to be like the world. So the world is not supposed to recognize us. But at the same time, one of the things that Sayers was able to do through her plays in particular and her radio talks was basically prepare a table for people that they're coming to eat, and then she's serving Jesus. And so
beautiful.
To be able to do that and to learn from her how to do that, I think is definitely worth the price of admission.
Brilliant. Amazing. Thank you, Alana. And thank you for everything that you shared about Dorothy L. Sayers. What an inspiring woman. And I know I'm super excited to dive into her work. Thank you for giving us a tasting platter today as well and helping us to get to know her a little bit better. And it was lovely chatting to you. Thank you for all that you do and all that you are. So if people want to check you out, where can they go to find out more about you and your ministry and everything that you're doing?
I am just on Instagram.
Okay.
Alana Kuwabara.
Yep.
Just my name. Super simple, easy to find.
Brilliant. So you don't have a secret Facebook account? Not on.
I have. It may as well be a secret Facebook account because I don't log into it.
Yes. Oh, Facebook sucks. I'll probably get shut down for saying this, but it's the worst.
They run Instagram.
Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna get hacked next week, and then my whole life will be shut down. No, awesome. Thank you so much for being with us, Alana. You are so much fun. You are a brilliant woman. I'm so blessed to call you friend and blessed to have this chat with you today. Thank you to everyone who's been listening as well or watching the podcast today. We're so glad that you could join us. We'll see you next time on the Eagle and Child podcast. Catch you later. Thanks so much for tuning into the Eagle and Child podcast. That's all from us for today. If you want to support us, you can like, subscribe, or drop us a review. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram @Eagle and Child podcast. We'll catch you next time. Much love.